Guys, I've been doing some digging regarding the situation surrounding the ACC, their grant of rights deal, which is through the year 2036, and in specifically, the one mystery team right now, in my eyes, of conference realignment. A team that, if things go crazy, we could see this team going to the Big Ten or the SEC. They're a very wanted university. It's the University of North Carolina. And there's a number of factors that make this team, at least for me, the most interesting team in terms of a potential realignment. Will they go to the Big Ten, along with a Notre Dame and a Stanford? Will they go to the SEC with the Clemson, FSU, and Miami package? Nobody really knows right now. I would guess they have been mocked more to the SEC than the Big Ten at this point. But we've got an article where North Carolina stands amidst the conference realignment frenzy and how the deals tie in. You can take a look. Let's get into the grant of rights. We've talked about it. We've referenced it. Can these teams in the ACC get out of this horrible deal? I'm talking about Clemson. I'm talking about, North Carolina, Florida State, teams like that. The grant of rights gives the ACC control over media rights for each of its member schools. Essentially, the TV revenue that a school makes from the ACC's contract with ESPN goes to the ACC, and that pool of money is evenly distributed among the member schools. When Maryland left what a great job by Maryland. Oh my goodness. Maryland leaving the ACC in 2014. Wow. They made themselves a lot of money. It sparked rumors of other schools doing the same, which could have dissolved the conference. To combat this, the ACC had each member school sign the grant of rights to lock the schools into the conference for the long term. And that's the exact problem the Pac-12 currently has. They don't have one of these deals. They're actually negotiating their next TV contract, which is why we've all brought up the idea of the Pac-12 dissolving. And it's like a 55% chance the Pac-12 stays together, at least according to a Pac-12 source. I read that yesterday. When the ACC and ESPN announced the formation of the ACC networks, the ACC network is already 6 years old. I thought it was launched in 2019. Guys, the time frames, I can't remember stuff anymore. I don't know what it is. There's just so many articles. There's so much data. The ACC extended the grant of rights to last until 2036 instead of 2027. Wow, what a job by the ACC to really extend that, because if it was 2027, we'd be talking about what type of exit fee North Carolina would face, Clemson would face, and it probably wouldn't be a very big exit fee if they're only locked into a contract through 2027. The fact that it's 2036, that exit fee is going to be insanely high. When it was originally supposed to end. However, conferences like the Big Ten and the SEC have more lucrative TV contracts than the ACC, just a little bit. And it's only going to get way worse. And it's going to be appalling once the numbers come out on the Big Ten and some of these ACC teams. I mean, isn't it crazy? You're Clemson, you're, FSU, you're Miami, and you see Rutgers making $100 million, or you see Maryland or, Northwestern, things like that. It is ridiculous. That's why the thought process behind the ACC struggling to keep these teams is the horrible grant of rights deal. And we've heard the thought of unequal revenue distribution in the ACC to keep some of these bigger teams happy, because overall they're making so much less than even, the worst teams in the Big Ten, at least at this point. It says, in the end of 2020, the ACC generated about $500 million. However, in the same time frame, the Big Ten and SEC both reported numbers north of $700 million, and thus their member schools will earn more revenue than the ACC. And even still, it's actually worse because the ACC has a horrible deal to where, the Big Ten and the SEC might make 20% more, but because the deal is so bad for the ACC teams, the Big Ten and the SEC teams with their new deal are going to make 50% more in terms of the TV money because the deal that they signed through 2036 is so bad. So if that is the case, why would schools not simply leave the ACC and join the Big Ten or the SEC? Because if a school does this per the grant of rights, the ACC would still control all revenue that the departing school produces from their home games up until 2036 when the deal expires. And then it says, what happens next? An ACC school leaving the conference isn't likely to happen anytime soon. For this to happen, a school would have to challenge the grant of rights as well as evaluate its ability to sustain the revenue it would lose as a result of leaving the conference and violating the grant of rights. So the thought process behind getting out of this grant of rights deal revolves around the idea if enough members in the ACC want to leave, that would create an opening, a legal opening to void the grant of rights deal, and they could potentially get out of it. This grant, something is going to have to give with this grant of rights deal. There is no way that Clemson, that Florida State, Miami, North Carolina, that these schools are going to simply accept this deal through 2036. Once again, guys, we haven't gotten the numbers yet. Once we get the numbers on how much the Big Ten's going to make with the additions of USC and UCLA, once we get the numbers on how much the SEC is going to make, the official numbers, it's going to be clear as day. Some of these teams in the ACC are getting screwed, and if you're saying they can't leave due to the grant of rights, you have to somehow balance this. There's going to have to be some sort of renegotiation in terms of this to keep some of these schools happy, because there's going to be schools that are like, listen, this is ridiculous. We either got to get out of this or we have to create some sort of unequal revenue sharing, which is something that was proposed over a month ago when the whole realignment situation was really hot. People were making articles and talking about the ACC possibly discussing unequal revenue distribution. And it's because they're so desperate to keep these teams, they got to keep them happy some way. And then this is a quote from the ACC commissioner. I think you have to be smart. You have to be strategic. And then he says, making a move just to make a move doesn't make any sense. So is he referencing the ACC trying to add any teams? I don't know. The only really situation with the ACC, this was multiple years ago, the idea of the ACC adding Notre Dame, which at this point is a complete pipe dream, which is a real shame because we were getting so close to a great form of parity in college football. Yes, the SEC was still going to be number one, but if Notre Dame would have joined the ACC, it would have helped that conference so much. The Big Ten is in a great position right now. The Pac-12 with Lincoln Riley and USC, and you've got Utah, who's a solid program. You've got Oregon with their NIL collectives, getting 5-star quarterbacks. We were at least achieving, slowly but surely, some form of parity. Obviously, it's all completely out the window now with the realignment with the Big Ten and SEC moving to 16 teams. But the thought process was, if we want full parity, it would include Notre Dame joining the ACC. Of course, Notre Dame is in the ACC in college basketball, along with a number of other sports, but they want to maintain being an independent, where I would 100% agree. If I was Notre Dame and I was that obsessed with being an independent, there's no point in joining the ACC if you care that much about being an independent. The only conference that could entice you, that makes sense to join, is the Big Ten, and that's where the speculation on them joining the Big Ten, because they'd make so much more money in the Big Ten than as an independent. Remember, their TV deal with NBC, they were getting like $20 million per year. Now, it's going to go way up, but is it going to get to $100 million? There's no chance an independent school is going to get $100 million. They don't generate that much, but if they went to the Big Ten, they'd be getting $100 million. So that's the whole battle for Notre Dame. Do we want all the money, or, we're still going to get a lot of money, but we can stay independent? How much do they care about being an independent? That's going to be the key thing. Realistically, with the playoff expanding to 12 teams, they can stay an independent and be fine. I thought it was dumb of them to be an independent during the 14 playoff era, because if you lose once and you're Notre Dame, you're screwed because you don't have the 13th data point of the conference championship. But now with the 12-team playoff, they could be an independent, lose 2 games, and still make the playoffs. But when it comes to this situation, it says, so what does this mean for North Carolina regarding how the Tar Heels fit into the grand scheme of realignment? UNC may have to leave the ACC at some point if it wants to keep its 28 varsity sports intact. So that's the stuff on North Carolina, and this would all be down the line if this grant of rights gets renegotiated, if enough members of the conference vote, against this deal. The idea is Notre Dame and Stanford go to the Big Ten, Washington and Oregon go to the Big Ten. That creates a West Wing for the Big Ten, and the SEC would be knocking on the door saying, you want to double your money per year in TV revenue. Join this conference. And the reason North Carolina is the mystery team, because I could see North Carolina in the Big Ten, I could see North Carolina in the SEC, and then you also have the Duke factor. Is Duke attached to the hip of North Carolina? That's what makes North Carolina so interesting. If you're asking me, if Washington goes somewhere, it's the Big Ten. Well, I mean, or maybe I don't see the Big 12. Like, if Oregon goes somewhere, to me, it's the Big Ten. If Florida State goes somewhere, it's the SEC. If Miami goes somewhere, it's the SEC. If Clemson goes somewhere, it's the SEC. If North Carolina goes somewhere, it's either the Big Ten or the SEC. If Virginia goes somewhere, it's the Big Ten. So, there's multiple schools where I'm sure if they go somewhere, this is the one school where it really could be either or, the SEC versus the Big Ten, if we do get the conference realignment. So, guys, that is the latest stuff on the ACC grant of rights. It is signed through 2036. And how about this? You want to talk about a downgrade? Dixie State is apparently now Utah Tech. Probably one of the dumbest names I've heard. Utah Tech will be facing BYU. I just thought this was funny. Dixie State, I think, is a cool name. I don't know. But they changed it. The FCS school is now Utah Tech, so that is interesting. And then we've got the good, bad, and the ugly, the impact of realignment on the Mountain West. And of course, we know the good is going to be San Diego State. They're getting into a expanded Pac-12 for sure. They're locked in as one of the teams. If the Pac-12 can keep everyone, they want to expand back to 12 teams. They're taking San Diego State. And then he also says Fresno State. I think it's unlikely the Bulldogs land in a Power 5 conference, but they have done an excellent job of marketing themselves and possibly getting into the conversation. Yeah, Fresno State is one of the top teams as well, along with SMU possibly going to the expanded Pac-12. And then it says the bad. Yeah, Boise State, they're just too small. Originally, when I first started following realignment stuff, I'm like, man, Boise State is going to be wanted by the Pac-12. It makes so much sense. But in terms of overall, the way it's structured, the media deals, the revenue, they just simply are too new, they're too young, they're not big enough, and they're not wanted. They don't have a big enough media overall market, TV market, and that is why it's crazy, because they've got such an unbelievable history in the Mountain West, such a good university in terms of their college football, one of the best winning percentage all time, top 3. It's crazy. Now, sure, they don't face a tough schedule, but still. And then the other losers, UNLV. This could have been a great chance for UNLV. They've got the Vegas market, but they're just horrible. It says huge market, new stadium, great location, and they're not competitive at all in football. And then also Colorado State is another loser. And then it says the ugly, every other team. Yeah, I don't think there's another team in the Mountain West that'll get into a Power 5. It references Air Force. I think Air Force is going to have a good season this year, but they're not getting into a Power 5 conference. So that is just kind of an interesting article on that. But just wanted to go over the grant of rights deal, the ACC, and the most interesting mystery team of the whole realignment process, because you're talking about North Carolina. I would say if I had to guess right now, and North Carolina is in a new conference in 2027, I'm saying it's the SEC just barely. Just barely. And then the whole Duke element as well. Very interesting team that is wanted and would be a fit in both the SEC and the Big Ten. They've, the academics, the basketball program, the improving football program, the overall alum base. It's all there. So they are the total package, and they will be wanted if we do get the 20-team super conferences. I'm confident if the 20-team super conferences come, I would say North Carolina is in probably the SEC. That's my opinion. North Carolina is in the SEC in that case. Maybe the Big Ten really wants them. This is all speculation, but I would say the Big Ten, if they can't get Notre Dame, they might shift their focus to North Carolina in that scenario. So guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.